Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday and Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap Limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @Pless. Here are the key tenets to my approach of trading. For those of you who've seen my webinar before, please bear with me. I never know when someone is new to the webinar, so I need to go through this every time. Please bear with me. I'll go through this as quickly as possible. Here are the key tenets to my approach of trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedge activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures, and I think that certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and the hedge their delta exposure with ES futures. And for the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index, QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. And note there were a couple questions about the index relationships that I use and how to use those this morning in the Options-Doug chat channel. So I'll go over that today. So this is the starting point here that I'm focusing on for the S&P 500. I'm focusing on SPX and SPY levels. This is where options trades are placed and where market makers may have to hedge or change their hedging. And that it applies for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And again, for NASDAQ 100, I'm focusing on NDX and QQQ. So much more about that as the webinar progresses. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading, and the first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as a directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups, sorry about that for those of you who are in Discord. I was not sharing my screen. I just fixed that. Sorry about that. All right, so here's my process. I have a two-step process for trading. And the first is planning. And I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as their directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis. And for setups, And when I talk about setups, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. So I'll talk about setups in the S&P 500 today, and setups in the S&P 500 can be taken with ES futures, SPX options, SPY options, XSP options, or SPY shares. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat in YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for today, Wednesday, January 17th. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, and events for today as well as the rest of the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups from earlier today. Then I'll get to live market. And when I get to live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with news items. So there were a couple of scheduled news items, key news items, and then one unscheduled. We'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so let's take a look now at the ES futures and Bookmap. This is the S&P 500 futures and Bookmap. So first of all, the ADP payroll data came out. That's the private payroll data came out at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Looks like maybe there was a little bit of a positive reaction. Anyway, ADP data came out less than expected, but it was greater than the previous number, also above zero, greater than zero. The previous number was negative. All right, so that was the ADP employment data. And then at 10 a.m., the ISM services PMI came out, and that was stronger than expected. Greater than expected, greater than previous number, also greater than 50, indicating expansion in the services economy. All right, so it looks like there was a negative reaction to that. Anyway, the move down already began. We'll talk about this setup. Very nice setup. Right around 945, short at the SPY 693 call wall. And eventually down to the SPY 691 volatility trigger. All right, the next news item, and this was unscheduled, and this is all that I saw. So at 10:38, news came out that China had instructed Chinese companies to halt orders of the NVDA H200 chips. Those are the older chips that are designated for China. Don't know what was the cause of that, but that caused a quick drop in the market and then a quick recovery. And the drop was down again to the SPY 691 volatility trigger. All right, upcoming for the rest of the week on Friday, the jobs report comes out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That is the December jobs report, delayed a week. And I believe this will be the first complete, up-to-date jobs report since the government shutdown. And then also Michigan consumer sentiment comes out at 10 a.m. on Friday. All right, so that'll wrap up the week. All right, so let's move on to positional analysis. And I've already pointed out a couple of key levels on this chart. First of all, the SPY 693 call wall, excellent entry point for a short. So I'll go through this short at around 945, step by step. The key confluences in this trade, confirmations of the trade. And then, of course, again, the SPY 691 volatility trigger acting as support and a good entry point for long. And then in between those two levels, this is the key SPX 6950 level. And that was noted as resistance in the Spotgamma AM Founders Note. And it has been in play earlier today and still in play. All right, questions about index relationships. So here I've just focused on SPY and SPX levels on my chart. We'll take a look at the underlying index charts. Let's go ahead and do that now. Then I'll talk about the index relationships. And this applies to the S&P 500 and NASDAQ or any other index that you're looking at. Maybe you trade the Russell 2000. This would apply to the Russell 2000 as well. All right, so this is the ES Futures of Bookmap. And Senator Todd, sorry about the pronunciation. Welcome, glad you're here. Ask, where do you get call wall data from? That's from Spotgamma. So I get all the options information from Spotgamma. And we'll take a look at some of the Spotgamma Spotgamma tools in just a couple of minutes. All right, so this is the ES Futures. So again, let's take a look at the underlying index charts. So for the S&P 500, we're going to go to the underlying index, and that is the SPX. So this is a 1 year, 1 day chart. And of course, the big rally began April last year and really continues. And the deeper pullbacks began on October 10th. But SPX has continued to make new highs. All right, so let's zoom in now. And again, the rally continues just with deeper pullbacks. Let's take a look at a 30-day 1 hour chart. So zooming in on time frame a little bit. So looking at most recent price action, after a rally, SPX consolidated between right around 6,800, 6,900. There was a brief shakeout, then a rally to new highs, another pullback, down below 6,850, and then now again a rally, making new highs in the new year. All right, so this was Friday, January 2nd. And on Monday this week, SPX gapped up and has continued to move higher, making a new high today, intraday high, at right around 69.65. And note a very important level, right around 6,900. And this is Spotgamma's bull-bear line in the sand. So that level has acted as resistance. And now key SPX is broken up above that level. And next level in play is the 7,000 call wall. And that it could be a target end of the week depending on the data that comes out, or maybe next week with options expiration. All right, so let's take a look at the levels on this chart. I'm going to start with the expected moves. First of all, the dashed purple lines are showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. This is based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Those levels remain in place the entire week. And note SPX is trading up above the upper weekly expected move today. All right, the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move, also based on the options market. This is based on the closing price for SPX from yesterday, so those levels change every day. And I do post the expected moves every day in Discord in the Options-Doug chat channel for SPX, ES, and NQ. So SPX trading inside its upper daily expected move, lower daily expected move, that daily expected range, but trading up above the upper weekly expected move. All right, let's take a look at the levels on this chart, the Spotgamma levels. These are based on gamma-weighted open interest. They're provided to Spotgamma subscribers. I'm going to point out the key daily levels. First of all, the put wall has now moved down to 6,700. That's a strike with large net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support. Certainly not in play for today. And then the volatility trigger has moved up to that key 6,900 level. The volatility trigger is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And note that is based on Spotgamma's older total open interest model. And we'll take a look at a view of gamma in just a moment that's based on their newest synthetic open interest model. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the call wall remains at 7,000, and that is also the absolute gamma strike. So the call wall is a strike with large net positive gamma. It can be expected to act as resistance. And then the absolute gamma strike is the strike with large absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma-weighted open interest is concentrated. All right, shifts in levels. So again, the put wall shifted lower, and the volatility trigger shifted slightly higher. And then for SPY, the volatility trigger also shifted higher, as well as the absolute gamma strike. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1 minute chart. So we'll zoom in on this just a little bit. So you can see Monday, the gap up. Oops. Monday gap up. And the new year really gets going. Gap up, then more consolidation on Monday, then rally resumes on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, it looks like a little bit more consolidation, but overall trading slightly higher and above now 69.50. All right, so again, as I mentioned before, SPX trading up above the upper weekly expected move. Again, also this 69.50 large gamma 3 level. All right, that is the SPX. Let's take a quick look at SPY. Again, I mentioned a couple of key SPY levels in play. So let's zoom in. All right, so here's the SPY call wall at 693, acting as resistance. This is a very nice entry point for a short. And then the 691 volatility trigger, nice entry point for a long. This is the reaction to the NVDA news right there. All right, back to Bookmap. So I pointed out the key levels in play. 691 volatility trigger on the downside, and earlier in the day, the 693 call wall in play. And Seditot, sorry about the pronunciation. I cover SPX. I'll cover NASDAQ. I'll get to the NASDAQ in just a moment. Yeah, I cover both the indexes. All right, so again, I pointed out the key levels. We'll talk about setups in just a couple of minutes. So we'll move on to NASDAQ right now. Oh, let me just cover one thing. So again, index relationships. So here's how I use those index relationships that I post in Discord every day. So we'll talk about the S&P 500. So first of all, there's a relationship between ES and SPY. And I post that in Discord. And today that ES to SPY ratio is 10.0968. So I just add that on my spreadsheet here to this. So I multiply this number, the SPY 640 level, of course well out of play, but I have a list of SPY levels. And then I convert that to the equivalent ES number right here. This is my spreadsheet, and that is the price lines add-on that takes that information on the spreadsheet and displays it on my Bookmap chart. And that is again, the price lines add-on, and it is available in the Bookmap marketplace. It is a paid add-on. And then for the S&P 500, the offset is 41 points today. So I'm showing SPX. Well, we'll take a look at a more current level. So here's the SPX 7,000 level that I'm showing the equivalent ES at 7,041. And that's how I get the index levels on my chart with the index relationships and the price lines add-on. All right, so now on to NASDAQ. Same thing applies to NASDAQ. Much stronger than the S&P 500 today. All right, so for the NASDAQ, I'm looking at NDX and QQQ levels. So let's take a look at those right now. I know there are a lot of lines on this chart, and we'll isolate the QQQ levels, NDX levels that were key today, and then we'll get back to the NQ futures and Bookmap. All right, first QQQ. Zoom in. All right, so before the cash open, support around the 622 volatility trigger. Then a break higher. So the rally really began before the cash open, right around 6:30. And now QQQ trading above the 627 call wall. And note this 625 large gamma 3 level did act as resistance earlier today. All right, so those are the QQQ levels in play, and the yellow lines showing just the round numbers, which can also are often in play. Let's take a look at NDX. Zoom in. All right, so this morning, right after the cash open, NDX, 25,600, absolute gamma strike, acting as support. Then this combo 3 level, and that is 25,691, acting as resistance. Next level of resistance, this combo 2 level at 25,742. And now NDX is traded up to these levels. And the upper level there is the 25,800 large gamma 4 level. And there's the combo 1 level just below that. All right, so NDX stepping up from level to level. And again, this is how I look at the NASDAQ with a combination of the QQQ and NDX levels. And I show those on my NASDAQ NQ chart here. So no matter what I'm trading, no matter what version of NASDAQ I'm trading, whether it's NQ futures, micro futures, QQQ shares, QQQ options, this is the chart that I look at with these levels on my chart. All right, so I've pointed out the key levels. There's the NDX 25,600 absolute gamma strike, combo 3 level, acted as resistance. Next level, the combo 2 level, acted as resistance. Then here's the that cluster of levels up above with the 25,800 large gamma 4 level and the 794 combo 1 level just below that. And I also have key NQ levels on this chart. Here's the upper weekly expected move, just showing how strong NASDAQ is this week. And then here's the upper daily expected move. So it looks like NASDAQ NQ has found some resistance around the upper daily expected move. And again, we'll talk about setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, so that's NASDAQ. Shifts and levels. For NDX, the absolute gamma strike did shift higher. And for QQQ, the volatility trigger shifted higher. All right, let's wrap up our positional analysis. Sorry this has taken so long. By taking a quick look at gamma, this will give us an indication of the potential for volatility. All right, so this is the trace gamma heat map. This is available to Spotgamma subscribers. Blue shading is showing positive gamma. Remember, in positive gamma, we're looking for lower volatility, more mean reverting price action. And in red shading, negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility, faster price action, more trending price action. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. All right, let's step back in time. Take a look. Let's go all the way back to 9:30. So you can see at 9:30 at the cash open, SPX was trading in positive gamma, shown by the blue shading, with the 69.50, the largest gamma strike on the board. Positive gamma, GEX bar. So let's step through time and we'll see how this is now changed to negative gamma. So this is market maker's position. Now shifting to negative gamma and still positive gamma up above, centered around the 7,000 level. All right, so now SPX trading in a zone of negative gamma. By the way, this chart is only available for SPX, not available for any other instruments. All right, so now SPX trading in a zone of negative gamma, so we're looking for higher volatility right now. All right, so the levels that we've taken a look at, these are static. They're updated once a day. They're based on open interest, which is updated sometime overnight. And now we're looking at the trace gamma heat map that is updated every 10 minutes. And now let's move on to real-time data. Sidid Todd again asked NDX chart. I assume you mean NQ chart. What are the yellow, blue lines in lower pane? Yeah, we'll take a look at that when I get to setups in just a moment. All right, so I'm going to start with the S&P 500, and then we'll move on to NASDAQ and then take a look at some stocks. All right, so now we're moving on the real-time data execution. So this is the Spotgamma Hero indicator. Hero stands for Hedging Impact Real-Time Options. It's showing options trades of market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index components. We've already taken a look at a couple of those, SPX and SPY. And this signal also includes options trades and market maker hedging activity for ES and XSP. All right, the white line is price for SPX, and the purple line is the hero signal. A rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta options positions. They are buying calls and or selling puts. Market makers take the opposite side of those trades, and they have to buy ES futures to hedge their delta exposure. And a falling hero signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options positions. They're buying puts and or selling calls. And again, market makers take the opposite side of the trades, and they have to sell ES futures to hedge their delta exposure. All right, so I want to focus on one setup today. And by the way, this is the older version of Hero. I just find it a little bit easier to look at in these webinars. where I'm jumping from one instrument to another pretty quickly. All right, so let's take a look at this setup. And I'm going to focus on this short setup at 9:45. And I want to go through this step by step. So when I'm trading, I'm looking at multiple screens. So I'm looking at Bookmap, Hero, and my trading platform all at the same time with 3 different screens. Of course, when I'm presenting, I can only show one screen, so I'm going to have to show this one screen at a time. So looking at this, there's a brief dip for about 5 minutes. Then the S&P 500 rallied. All right, first warning signal was this flow alert, signaling significant options activity and a potential reversal in hedging flow from, in this case, positive delta to negative delta. So when I see the flow alert, that puts me on alert to look for a potential reversal. All right, so that's the first step. Second step is this peak reversal. And sure enough, just a few minutes later, that reversal in hedging flow happens. Again, from positive delta to negative delta. All right, so that's what I see on the Hero signal. Now let's go to Bookmap. Let me zoom in on this, and I'm just going to focus on this one setup today. Go through it step by step. All right, so I already know Hero signal comes in around here, so I'm on alert. Looking at Bookmap, I see this SPY 693 call wall. So now I see a potential resistance level. I think Hero may reverse, resistance level just above. So now I'm watching Bookmap. And that's exactly what happened. The volume dots of Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. And magenta dots indicate more sellers than buyers. And Shiva, welcome, glad you're here, asked, does the Hero signal front run the price, or it's matching the price movement? Trying to find out any instant will Hero signal give an indication what is to happen. Sometimes Hero gives a clearly leading indicator, sometimes not. This is one way to use Hero right here with this alert. So follow this step by step. So step 1, Hero signal rising, alert. I'm looking for a potential reversal. So yeah, that was a front run. That was a leading indicator of a potential reversal. Step 2, look at Bookmap. I see a resistance, a level that I expect to act as resistance, the SPY 693 call wall. All right, step 3, I'm looking at the Hero peak. And then step 4, I'm watching Bookmap. I see sellers starting to come in, large magenta volume dots. All right, looking at the subchart, so here you go, Setatat. I have 3 lines in the subchart. The dark blue line is cumulative volume delta. That comes with all versions of Bookmap. Cumulative volume delta reverses, starts moving lower. All right, next line's in the chart. Yellow line is showing stop orders. So the stop line also reverses lower. And I'm using sum mode for the stops and icebergs here. And by the way, this is part of the MBO bundle. That's an add-on. So this is an extra add-on that you can subscribe to in the Bookmap marketplace. So stop orders also falling. So this is showing sell stop orders. So that's also falling. So I know cumulative volume delta is falling. Aggressive sellers started to come in. And then finally, the light blue line is showing iceberg orders. Large traders use iceberg orders to hide their size. So all three lines in the subchart are falling. This is very bearish. When all three lines, often the large traders will fade the move. So they will sell strength and buy weakness. In this case, they are selling weakness. All three lines of the subchart moving lower. Traders taking negative delta options positions. And price moves lower. So if you're aggressive, that was your first entry point. And then next entry point, a break below the 69.50 level with a target at the SPY 691 volatility trigger. So that's the short setup in the SP 500 step by step. All right, set it. Did that answer your question about the yellow and blue lines in the lower pane? Again, yellow stops, blue icebergs shown in sum mode, and they're also on chart indicators. I don't have those on right now. All right, Una, welcome, glad you're here. Ask if I don't have Spotgamma, can I use the put call walls at maxpain.com? Sorry, I'm not familiar with that. They may or may not be the same as Spotgamma. I've used Spotgamma for several years. And Austin Daly, welcome, glad you're here. Ask, can you enable the Spotgamma retail hero indicator? And that's something that I normally don't look at. We'll take a quick look at that. I don't know if that's even available anymore. Yeah, this is not something I look at. It just shows retail trades versus all other trades. So that's the red line. So that really doesn't provide much information, retail. So that's something I just normally don't look at. Sean Canna, welcome, glad you're here. And Sean asked, what is the light blue line on the chart? So let's go back to Bookmap. All right, so the light blue line is VWAP. And I just use the default. So you have to use in Bookmap, you have to go to the add-ons manager and use this AVWAP, anchored VWAP, and I just use the defaults. And I start VWAP actually the day before, or the actual start of the futures at 6 p.m. the day before. So you can set this however you want it, and you can also create a new VWAP or an anchored VWAP. But I just use those. That's what I use. So the light blue line is VWAP. All right, so that is the S&P 500. That's one setup that I wanted to cover and go through that short setup at 9:45 a.m. step by step. Again, looking at Hero and Bookmap and putting it all together with the levels and options trades and order flow. All right, so let's move on. Let's take a look at NASDAQ now. Again, NASDAQ a little bit stronger than the S&P 500 today. So let's go back to Hero. And by the way, I'm showing the total signal in Hero here, combining puts and calls. And we'll do that for equities. When we get to the stocks, I'm going to shift to puts and calls. All right, so there's another signal that we can take a look at for the SP 500. This is the SP 500 equity signal. So it's often better at showing the overall trend. So what this is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. And this is bullish today, showing traders are buying calls and selling puts in the S&P 500 stocks. And that will be quite a few of the MAG-7. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So today, I thought this S&P 500 provide, it is very typical. It's noisier, but provides a better indication at the turning points. whereas the S&P 500 equities today is providing more of a signal of the overall trend. All right, let's move on to NASDAQ now. So just like the S&P 500, there are two signals that we can take a look at for the NASDAQ. This is the NASDAQ index signal showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the two index components that we've already taken a look at, QQQ and NDX. And then there's another hero signal that we can take a look at, and that is the MAG-7 signal. And this was the better signal for the NASDAQ today. This is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVDA, and Tesla. And note, this is a very large component of the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. And this MAG-7 signal, we'll take a look at the delta notional here at right around 1.5 billion. Makes up a large component of the S&P 500 equity signal, which is 1.93 billion. So right around 75% of this S&P 500 equities options trades is concentrated in the MAG-7. All right, so back to NASDAQ, MAG-7. Traders taking positive delta positions from the open. I'm going to shift to puts and calls now. Orange line shows calls, blue line shows puts. This is showing that traders are buying calls and selling puts. And it looks like they stopped. Sorry about that. Get back to that. All right, so they stopped selling puts right around 11:45, and now have started selling a few calls. NASDAQ is moving lower. All right, so overall for today, traders buying calls, selling puts in MAG-7 stocks, driving NASDAQ higher. So here's the break above the NDX 25,600 absolute gamma strike, just to the open. Multiple pullbacks. For long entries, there's a deep pullback to VWAP. Though they'll pull back to this trend line I drew. Up above the upper weekly expected move, up to the upper daily expected move, and these two NDX levels that I mentioned before, and also above the QQQ 627 call wall, and now NASDAQ trading down below those levels. Looking at the subchart here, you can see generally rising cumulative volume delta up until about 11:45, then cumulative volume delta starts to roll over. Note also, in contrast to the S&P 500, large traders were fading this move with iceberg orders, that's shown by the light blue line. And then the move up this morning was driven by buy stop orders shown by the yellow line, and then they took their foot off the gas right around noon. All right, so that's NASDAQ, and the uptrend from this morning clearly broken. Again, right around the upper daily expected move for NQ. All right, any questions about the indexes? Any more questions about the indexes? If not, let's move on. Let's take a look at some stocks. All right, today I want to focus on setup that I call the bullish opening drive. All right, so let's start with Amazon. And let's see what options traders are doing this morning. And let's go to Hero. All right, so I'm showing puts and calls now separately. Let's zoom in on this. All right, so this is a very nice bullish opening drive in Amazon. Mainly driven by call buyers. That's shown by the rising orange line. Amazon finds support at the 240 call wall key gamma strike, breaks higher. Traders also selling puts. So when traders buy calls and sell puts, market makers take the opposite side of those trades, and they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. Also, a flow alert came in a little bit late, signaling significant options activity. And the main movement happened, that was just about 10 minutes. So a very brief bullish opening drive driven by call buyers when the call buyers and put sellers take the foot off the gas. Price consolidates. All right, so let's zoom back out. But still grinding higher today. So notice the call line has been very erratic, but traders have been selling puts all day, gradually driving Amazon higher. All right, back to Bookmap. Remember the 240 call wall key gamma strike. Launching point for a long this morning. Let me tone down the volume dots just a little bit. So that a very fast, brief, bullish opening drive lasted about 10 minutes. Call buyers took their foot off the gas. Traders continue to sell puts. Deep pullback to VWAP. Nice entry point for another long with a target at the 245 level. Heat map and Bookmap shows a history of limit orders on the order book. Those are limit sell orders acting as a magnet for price. Looks like those orders will finally consume just after 12:30. Looks like now Amazon is reversed lower down to VWAP again. All right, so that's Amazon. First bullish opening drive. One of the MAG-7 stocks. Next stock, Google. Another bullish opening drive. Let's see what options traders are doing. Again, driven primarily by call buyers. Looks like this flow alert was a little bit more timely. Supported at the 315 hedge wall, and then consolidation for quite a while at the 320 call wall. Now it looks like as the call buyers have come back in, Google started to trade above the 320 call wall. All right, so from 315 to 320, hedge wall to call wall, driven by call buyers. Let's take a look at Bookmap. $315 hedge wall, break above the 320 call wall, then consolidation around that level, then a breakout around noon as the call buyers came back in, and that was good for another 5 points up to 325. All right, so that's Google. Next stock, Microsoft. Looks like a lot of stocks have dropped pretty sharply, right around 150. I don't know. Was there any news? Anybody see any news? All right. So anyway, Microsoft, bullish opening drive driven by calls. Let's see. Take a look at Hero. Flow alert, call buyers, another bullish opening drive, take another leg up right around 10:30. Call buyers come back in, price moves higher, put sellers as well. Then they take the foot off the gas and Microsoft consolidates and now has moved a little bit lower as traders started selling calls. All right, so that's Microsoft, another bullish opening drive driven by call buyers for signal significant option activity, get your attention. All right, next stock, NVDA. Again, remember NVDA in the news this morning at 10:38. There's the reaction to the news. It looks like NVIDIA has recovered. Let's see about a half of that move, finding support at VWAP. Notice all the green volume dots on this move, first move up to about 10:30. A lot of aggressive buyers. Show my rising cumulative volume delta. Let's see what options traders are doing. Go to NVIDIA. All right, so initially in NVIDIA, traders were selling calls, quickly turned around, started buying calls. In the meantime, they were selling puts, and NVIDIA moved higher. So it looks like when that 10:38 news came out, call buyers just stopped buying, put sellers stopped selling. NVIDIA dropped but did consolidate again. All right, next stock, Palantir. This bullish opening drive was not as clear in Palantir. Traders were selling puts. Call buyers came in a little bit late. Palantir broke above the 180 call wall key gamma strike and then moved up until about 12:15 when the call buyers and put sellers took the foot off the gas. So that fuel that had driven price higher along with aggressive buyers, we'll see in just a minute, has stopped blowing. And Holmes E8, welcome, glad you're here. You're welcome. Ask, I was wondering, how do you know if it's put sellers? Can't the outline heading upwards mean they're buying puts? No. So the direction of line indicates options delta. So rising lines indicate positive delta. So positive delta options trades are buying puts, buying calls, and selling puts. Sorry about that. So buying calls, selling puts, those are positive delta trades. So that is what rising lines indicate. And then falling lines indicates, a falling blue line indicates traders are buying puts, and a falling orange line indicates traders are selling calls. And again, in both cases, market makers take the opposite side of the trades. So just think of the, again, options delta in terms of the directional lines. Up, positive delta, down, negative delta. All right, so that's Palantir. Another little bit of a slow grind, bullish opening drive. Not anything like the really quick move up in Amazon. So let's go take a look at Bookmap for Palantir. And you're welcome, Holmes E8. All right, Palantir. Again, remember the bullish opening drive in Amazon. We'll go back to that. Lasted 10 minutes. Really the strong part of it. Whereas in Palantir, little bit easier to find an entry point here, and a bullish opening drive that lasted 3 hours, 9:30 to 12:30. The rising cumulative volume delta, all the green volume dots, a lot of aggressive buyers buying Palantir shares until 12:30, when some aggressive sellers started to come in, and now Palantir giving back some of that move. Heat map in Bookmap shows the history of limit orders in the order book. showing these limit sell orders at the round number levels, acting as magnets for price, and as pretty typical, largest orders at the zeros and the fives. Zoom just a little bit. So it looks like the orders at 187 were consumed, and that was around the high of the day. Now Palantir moving lower. And again, note the call buyers and put sellers have taken the foot off the gas. All right, last stock I want to take a look at is Intel. And it was on my list of stocks. I have a list, a watch list of all the stocks that are available in Hero that I'm interested in trading. It's not a complete list. There's some stocks that I'm just not interested in trading, but I have a list. And Intel was at the top of the chart today. So this is a very nice bullish opening drive. Let's zoom in on this and see if there was an alert. Yeah, there was. That label there is obscuring it, but there was an alert that came in just after the open. Signal significant options activity. Traders are buying calls. A very bullish opening drive in Intel. Traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock that has their delta exposure. And then Intel stops right around 10:30. So 1 hour bullish opening drive as the call buyers and put sellers take the foot off the gas. So let's go take a look at Bookmap. Finally, Intel, another bullish opening drive. And this was the top gainer in my list of hero stocks this morning. So there you go. 6 different versions of a bullish opening drive. And then a short setup in the S&P 500. Looks like S&P ES is down now toward lows of the day again. Let's check NASDAQ. NASDAQ again giving up some of its move up, but not as weak as the S&P 500. Let's go back to Hero. And I'm going to go back to the total signal, go back to S&P 500. And the Hero signal has really been turning lower since just afternoon. Now at lows of the day at minus 2.62 billion. One other thing I want to check. So this is showing all expirations, all trades. Options that expire today, tomorrow, Friday, next week, next month. So now let's turn on the next expiry signal. So this is showing options that expire today for the S&P 500. Next expiry is 0 TD, options that expire today. So it looks like a good bit of this today is 0 DTE options, driving price up and down. And that's shown by the teal line. And you can tell that just by the close correlation between the teal line and the purple line. Let's turn that off. Let's go back to Bookmap. All right, so looking at Bookmap, you can see the aggressive stellars starting to come in about 12:15. Large magenta volume dots, falling cumulative volume delta. And price starts to move lower. Then resistance. Remember that last peak in the Hero signal, and that was again at the SPY 693 call wall, acting as a good entry point for a short. Let's go back to Hero. Flow alert, peak, breakdown, then a breakdown below the 693 call wall. Or actually then, let's go back, let's take a look. All right, so that second peak again there, right around before 2 o'clock, was at the 693 call wall. So that's this peak right here, 693 call wall. So repeat of the setup that I talked about right at the open, 9:45. Repeat, flow alert, call peak, breakdown at a level you expect to act as resistance. And it looks like and Sean asked, what are the 3 lines on the Hero chart again? All right, so let's go back to the Hero chart. All right, 3 lines, puts and calls. So the white line is price for SPX. This is the S&P 500 index signal. White line is price for SPX. The orange line shows calls, again for SPX, SPY, ES, and XSP, and the blue line shows puts. Directional line indicates options delta. All right, everyone, 2 nice, very clear short setups, 9:45 and again just before 2 p.m. Same setup, Hero flow alert, call peak, reversal at the 693 call wall level you expect to act as resistance. All right, everyone, my time is up. I want to thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your questions and comments. I really appreciate it when you participate. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you on Monday. Again, thank you very much for watching. Have a great afternoon. Bye.